It was pretty amazing when developer Panic Button managed to bring Doom 2016 to handhelds through the Switch. I love Doom 2016. I loved it on PS4, and I love it even more on the Switch. But they weren't done there. They've brought another, more recent first-person shooter to the Switch, aiming to show that Nintendo's handheld can even handle late 2017 AAA shooters. So, how is the latest entry in the Wolfenstein franchise on the go? Let's find out. Here is my review of Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus for the Nintendo Switch. First thing to say with story. If you have not played Wolfenstein: The New Order, I would not suggest jumping right into Wolfenstein 2 without doing some research. Yes, Wolfenstein 2 does have a little recap at the very beginning, but it's not a very good recap. It quickly goes through a few of the key events that happens to BJ through the first game, but will still leave you quite confused. As such, I'm going to give you a little summary of the world of Wolfenstein and the events of Wolfenstein: The New Order. If you haven't played that game or want to avoid spoilers for both games, I suggest skipping to the gameplay section. The world of Wolfenstein can be summarized pretty easily. Nazis won World War II by dropping an atom bomb on New York City, causing the United States of America to quickly surrender as Nazi Germany begins an occupation all over the country. In The New Order, you play as a military soldier named BJ, who fights during World War II, goes into a coma, wakes up almost 20 years later in the 1960s, and along with the nurse that he's fallen in love with, joins a resistance group to try to fight back. At the end of the game, he takes out a big commander and orders his troops to nuke a facility that he's in after he's been critically wounded and is bleeding out and dying. Wolfenstein 2 takes place literal moments after, with his allies coming in, finding him, patching him up, and taking him back to a stolen U-boat so that he can spend the next few months recovering, only to have the U-boat attacked and him jumping back into the fray while still wounded, crutching on a suit of power armor to keep him together as they keep fighting back the Nazis with the goals of starting a revolution and liberating America. The story of Wolfenstein 2 is a very well written and very dark and grim story. Seeing a world where Nazi Germany won World War II and basically forced their ideals on the rest of the world, especially the United States of America, is very dark and very hard to stomach. This is a very political game that throws all kinds of stereotypical abuse that never went away in this world right in your face over and over again. Within the game's first hour, I had already seen animal abuse, child abuse, racism, sexism, fat shaming, and a lot of other stuff. While I do agree that these are very effective ways to showcase and develop its story, it was very uncomfortable for me to watch all of these scenes. Do note that I'm not going to be taking points off the score for this. I recognize that this is just a very personal reason for me for not liking this. Just note that it's definitely not for everyone. As far as gameplay goes, Wolfenstein 2 is a first-person shooter with a lot of stealth elements thrown into the mix. Think of it as kind of an odd mix between Call of Duty and Metal Gear. First off, this is the base vanilla version of Wolfenstein 2. None of the DLC campaigns that released for the PS4 and Xbox One versions are here, and we don't know if we're ever going to get them. Bethesda noted that they were too busy optimizing the game that they didn't really have anything to say regarding the DLC. So I basically view it as the DLC for Borderlands 2 on the PlayStation Vita. Basically, I don't expect us to get it. The way it progresses is a pretty typical hub world and mission-based game. You have your hub world with all your NPCs and side quests, and you can go on missions out in the world. And you go back and forth constantly. But Wolfenstein 2 does mix this up a little bit in that a lot of times when you return to your hub world, the hub world serves as the next mission. The hub world is also the site of a very, very interesting little addition and Easter egg. If you find the club and go to an arcade cabinet, you can play a full port of the original Wolfenstein 3D inside Wolfenstein 2. Just modified a little bit, with the heroes now the Nazis and the enemies now the Resistance. Now, when you're going and exploring the actual levels and missions of the game, things are pretty linear. There's a very small amount of extra areas that you can find and traverse for collectibles. You basically have one path, just look for an open door, and that's where your path is going. But it's not as simple as just running through every area towards the end. The game has a very heavy stealth system in effect that reminds me of the Metal Gear series. In every area, you've got regular patrol enemies and you've got commander enemies. If the commander is not killed before you are seen or start running and gunning, they'll set off an alarm that'll bring reinforcements in. This sets the game up so you can play with however style you want. The game's got very cinematic stealth kills, so you can be a stealthy Solid Snake character and sneak around everybody, doing stealth kills until you find the commander, or you can just not care, start dual wielding shotguns and let the reinforcements come so you can go on a Nazi killing spree. And that's really a testament to how satisfying and fun the combat is. Whether you are running around dual wielding shotguns, or sneaking around and throwing a hatchet in the face of every Nazi you see, every kill and every progression point just feels so satisfying as you go through. Especially since the overbearing difficulty of the original release has been balanced since then, so none of the difficulty levels will feel too overwhelming. There is one odd part of the combat though. All of the levels basically just go in waves of enemies. There are boss fights in the game, but I never really noticed any boss fights until after I'd looked online and saw, hey, this is the boss fight. They basically just serve as slightly bigger enemies that appear in waves of other enemies. No indication that you're actually fighting a boss, just, hey, there's this new enemy that's slightly different from the others, go and fight it because it's joining all the other enemies you're fighting. Even all of the major villains that are shown in the storyline don't have boss fights attached to them. It was a very subtle way of doing it, and it felt very strange and off to me. Now, as far as content is concerned, the main campaign should take you about 15 hours to finish, regardless of what difficulty you're on. To add on to this, the post-game has a lot of assassination side quests that you do to unlock the secret final level, which will easily add at least another 4 to 6 hours onto your playtime. So even with the DLC taken out, you're going to get well over 20 hours out of this game. Now let's go into presentation, which shows that Panic Button has improved, but also had to make sacrifices. When you got the game docked, there is a slight blurring effect in most areas of Wolfenstein 2, but it's a less heavy blurring effect than Doom had on the Switch. But as soon as you undock the console and go into handheld mode, the blurring looks significantly worse than Doom's blur was. Every non-text character, effect, and environment takes some getting used to not really mess with your eyes because the blurring effect is so bad. Performance has definitely improved though. There was only one small area of Wolfenstein 2 where the frames dropped under 30 frames per second, and thankfully it was a room that had no enemies, so the optimization definitely shows in the frame rate. What it doesn't show in is the Wolfenstein 3D port. When you're playing through that, I don't know if it's because the 60 frames per second console version was halved for the Switch, but it chugs and plays basically in slow motion. It's not unplayable, but it's very weird and very difficult to adjust to. Now let's get into battery life. I expected this to be about Doom's level, and it basically was. Here are my battery times from 100% to 0%. Maximum brightness with the Wi-Fi on, 2 hours and 28 minutes. Maximum brightness with the Wi-Fi off, 2 hours and 39 minutes. Lower brightness with the Wi-Fi on, 2 hours and 58 minutes. Lower brightness with the Wi-Fi off, 3 hours and 6 minutes. Slightly less than Doom, but still not terrible. In conclusion, Wolfenstein 2 brings modern shooting and Nazi killing to handheld fans with the Switch. While there are some issues with the blurring and content being removed, if you're looking for a great military shooter on the go and are willing to deal with the blurring effect in handheld mode, this definitely fits the bill. Reviews to Go rates Wolfenstein 2 for the Nintendo Switch a 7.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below or head to the website at www.reviewstogo.com.